3 minutes? Our next session will begin in the next 3 minutes. Remember that you guys can tag us via Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram using the hashtag DialogoCAF 2019. We'll begin the next section in 3 minutes. All right, guys, for those of you who are still in the room, I encourage you to begin taking your seats. We're about to begin with the next session. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin with the next session. I encourage you to take your seats. All right, and for this next session, first we want to thank Carla and the panelists for that fascinating discussion and for letting us know that USMCA may be on a path for possible ratification. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. So again, thank you to Carla and panelists for enlightening us on that session and for letting us know that Pelosi has told her that USMCA may be on a path for ratification in Congress. Our next session will be on China and Latin America relations beyond complementarity. The session will be moderated by Silvia Pavoni. Silvia is the economics editor at The Banker, a monthly publication of the Financial Times Group, for which she oversees the Americas coverage. She's an honorary fellow in the Department of Economics at the City University of London and an advisor for the organization called WIL, Women in Leadership in Latin America. Please welcome Silvia and her esteemed panelists to the stage.
Thank you, everyone. I hope a few of you will come back to the To the room, I know it's been a busy afternoon, but hopefully you will stay with us for what promises to be a very interesting session. We have a fantastic topic, which is the relationship between Latin America and the Caribbean and China. And to guide us through this fabulous subject, let me introduce you to my thank you for helping quieting down the audience. It feels like a very vivacious classroom. So, but I don't necessarily want to play teacher. So let me, as I said, let me introduce you to my wonderful panelists. So next to me here I have Isabel de Saint Malo, who has many years of experience as a consultant on public policy in Latin America, and she became the first woman to be elected as vice president in Panama. She also had positions as the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Panama and the United Nations Permanent Mission in New York, and for 15 years she worked with the United Nations Development Program in Panama, occupying different positions, including program manager. Next to Vice President de Saint Malo, we have Rosa Ng, who occupied the position of Deputy Director of the Dominican Geological Service. She was the Vice Minister of the Technical Ministry of the Presidency in charge of international cooperation. She has worked for the European Union, the Inter-American Development Bank, the United Nations Development Program, and the German Agency for Technological Cooperation as a consultant. And in 2011, she was designated as the representative of the Dominican Republic in Beijing and served in that position until 2018. And next to Ms. Ge, we have Alex Hao, who is a partner at JunHe's New York office and a member of the firm's strategy committee. He advises U.S. clients on compliance with Chinese law on issues like anti-bribery, anti-monopoly, labor and employment, and national security. He also acts as outside general counsel for Chinese clients investing in the United States. And next to Mr. Hao, we have another Chinese national. So we have a very well-balanced panel to address the topic of Latin America and the Caribbean and China. So Anton, who is an R&B specialist in the financial markets division at Standard Chartered Bank. He's based in New York. He's responsible for advising corporates and financial institutions in the Americas on the implications of China's financial market developments and the internationalization of the renminbi. He's also responsible for supporting Chinese corporations in the Americas on their financial markets exposure and liquidity management. So we'll have a bit of a financial and currency flair. We'll add that to the conversation. And last but certainly not least is Enrique Dussel Peters. So Professor Dussel Peters is an economics professor at the Graduate School of Economics at the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico. He is also the director of the Center for Chinese-Mexican Studies at the university. He has consulted on projects with the ECLAC, ILO, Ford Foundation, and the Inter-American Development Bank. His research has concentrated on theory of industrial organization, economic development, political economy, as well as the manufacturing sector, trade, and regional specialization patterns in Latin America and Mexico. So those so experienced that it took me, how long, like 5 minutes just to go through their very short bio, because the longer version is it will take us the whole hour, potentially. But let's start the conversation. So the relationship between China and Latin America and the Caribbean has certainly evolved in the years. It isn't just about trade. We've heard a very interesting panel just earlier about trade and trade integration. For the region, China is clearly a key trade partner, if not the key trade partner for some countries in the region. But again, this relationship has evolved, and we now have a dozen countries from Latin America that have joined the Belt and Road Initiative. A number have joined the Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank. So this relationship has really evolved. We've seen M&A deals. We've seen FDI flows moving over the years. So what's your assessment of these two areas, so the regional, Latin America and the Caribbean and China. How is this relationship evolving? Is it moving in the right direction? Are we positive about this direction of travel, or are there problems lurking in the future? And Vice President, perhaps Panama being the first to join the Belt and Road Initiative from the region, maybe you can kick us off.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I value the opportunity of sharing with you and participating in this panel. I think it's definitely evolving. It's constantly changing. The shape, it's still being defined. It's definitely moved from a relationship of China looking mostly for raw materials in the region to a China that is currently more and more present in terms of investment, in terms of infrastructure in the region. This is not random. It's not the result of not connected efforts. It's a result of a clear objective on the part of China, by the government of China, of interacting globally more. They have a very clear, specific vision of becoming a developed country, of interacting globally. And within that, they have a very clear, specific objective with Latin America. If you look at China's documents on Latin America, their foreign ministers' documents, you will find there that they have a clear statement to become closer to Latin America, to look into this region, and that has definitely gone along with their increasing political presence in the region. You see more and more very high-level authorities constantly visiting the region. You see commercial efforts. In the part of Latin America as well, you find the interest. I am not so sure that all of the countries within Latin America and the Caribbean have such a clear vision of what it is that we want from China. I think there is a clear vision that it brings many opportunities. Mm-hmm. But I do believe that we need to be very strategic into where those opportunities are and what are the sectors of our economies where we would like to work closer with China. I think definitely there is complementarity. The growth drive from China is and can continue to represent a growth drive for the region, and that is very, very positive. But I think if I were to concentrate on our homework as a region, we need to work harder on identifying our areas of strength, to work with China and give priority to those.
Okay. So did you feel that maybe so far China's at the upper hand when it comes to dealing with Latin America?
I think that China is it's very aggressive in dealing with Latin America. I think they are very serious about the presence. And I think that's good for Latin America, as long as we are clear on what our challenges are, what opportunities are, what do we have to offer, and work on those.
Okay, great. Ms. Ng, what's your take?
Bueno, a mí me tocó ser un testigo presencial de lo que ha pasado en esta década, estando como representante del país en Beijing y como latinoamericana, pues yo diría que he visto muchas cosas. Puedo decir como el poeta chileno Nobel de Literatura, que yo confieso que he vivido realmente memorias en China, memorias desde el punto de vista latinoamericanista y memorias también al ver todo el cambio que se ha dado en China ya desde una década. Y yo quisiera felicitar a la CAF porque justamente ha sido una institución, yo diría la pionera, en crear ese puente entre los latinoamericanos y los chinos. Yo conocía ya a don Enrique García, que vino con una camada de expertos extraordinarios. Me he encontrado aquí con muchos de ellos, buscando ese interactuar, ese conocimiento mutuo entre los latinoamericanos y los chinos, que como todos saben, realmente, digamos que tenemos unas maneras diferentes de pensar y de enfocar las cosas. China, en términos de 40 años, ha hecho una revolución en el sentido de que no se esperaba ese milagro logrado por una nación de esa manera, una nación que tiene 6.000 años de existencia y de cultura, y nosotros, los latinoamericanos, yo diría que teníamos como una especie de vacío dejado por los socios número uno, que han sido los Estados Unidos, y ese vacío vino a ser llenado por los chinos, por sus necesidades concretas, en el sentido de que obviamente China, para su desarrollo, su autodesarrollo, ha necesitado de los llamados commodities, que en eso la región pues ha servido para impulsar mucho las economías de muchos países. En ese sentido, pues hay que ver los retos a futuro que traerá esto, porque necesariamente ya hay países como el caso de Brasil, de Uruguay, de Argentina, de Chile, que son primer socio comercial de China, y muchos de los otros pues son segundos o son terceros. Entonces, China yo creo que llegó a Latinoamérica para quedarse. Pero hay que pensar también que la relación entre los pueblos de la América Latina y de China, e inclusive del pueblo americano y del pueblo canadiense, no es de ahora, es algo que viene de hace más de 2 siglos, desde que llegaron los primeros inmigrantes chinos a la América. Entonces, pues, hay que trabajar eso con mucho esfuerzo.
Thank you. And you introduced, of course, the States, which is the third partner in really influencing where this relationship will go in the future. So we're definitely going to go back to that later on. But I would like to hear what Mr. Howard has in mind when thinking about this evolving relationship.
Me llamo Alejandro y hablo un poquito español. So that's pretty much my Spanish. So no simultaneous translation from Spanish to English needed for me. But Chinese is my native language, but I've been in the U.S. for the past 19 years. Do a lot of work for Chinese companies, certainly in the U.S., mostly in the U.S., but also in Latin America. I guess that's why I'm here. I think to answer, by the way, I think it's purely coincidental that we are separate but equal here. I think it's just the way people took seats. And absolute gender equality. And
and I have to say, and sorry to interrupt you, but really we should pay homage to CAF and the dialogue and the organizers for making sure that there is a very good gender balance on the conference. So well done to them.
Now, I think you asked about, what's been happening over the past decade or so in terms of Chinese outbound investments, especially in Latin America. My view, I would argue that if you look at the past 10 years, I would argue that the Chinese outbound investments, including those into Latin America, has gone a cycle, just like an economic cycle, but related but different to that. What I mean by that is, if you look back 10 years ago, 2008, 2009, that's when the financial crisis just happened. It impacted China much less directly than it impacted America and the West. And, I think the prevalent feeling at that time in Beijing, in China, was that all of a sudden there's a lot of good assets out there, including in Latin America, to be had at very reasonable prices. I think that really triggered a huge surge of Chinese outbound investments, and especially spearheaded by the big SOEs, state-owned enterprises. As I said, I've been in the U.S. for 19 years. I wasn't aware. I don't think there was much really before the financial crisis in terms of Chinese outbound investments. So it was really a sea change. And for me personally, even though I do work on a daily basis in this respect, I still, sometimes I wake up on a morning and I feel like, hey, how did this happen? And I think one of you mentioned China as a developed country. For all those years, I've been taught, when I grew up in China, China is a developing country, and I think it still is. So all of a sudden, there's all this change that I think sort of make people dizzy, not just people, outside of China who are trying to adjust to it, but I think also, people from a Chinese background, they're also trying to, me included, also trying to adjust to the sea change. But if you look at the 10 years, the reason I describe it as a cycle is because, you start at the beginning of the cycle, right after the financial crisis, by going out in droves, right? And there's a state initiative. The government in Beijing is really prompting, encouraging, supporting all these companies to go out, and then you go into 2014, 2015, 16. 2016 was really the year when everything peaked, including investments into the United States, I think for Latin America as well. And then you got a lot of pushback, including from the United States, for CFIUS reasons, national security review reasons. I think we'll come to that maybe in a minute, because I do think it's a seminal topic and also very relevant to Latin America. And then you have all sorts of national security and other pushback from the many destination countries, not just the U.S. but Germany, many countries in Europe. It remains to be seen whether the same thing is going to happen with respect to Latin America. But I think where we are right now, so 2017, if you look at 2017 versus 2016, in the U.S., for example, you're seeing a huge drop off in terms of Chinese investments coming into the U.S., 17 versus 16. In Latin America, I think it's less pronounced, but it's also there. So I think I wouldn't say that we're back to square one after 10 years. I would describe this, again, as a cycle, as a process. I think where we are in the process is that, everybody outside of China and inside of China, people, I think, need to take stock and think of the past 10 years and see what has gone right, what has gone wrong, what explained much of the pushback from many of the countries, even though many people, including in the U.S., many local state governments, and including many on the federal level, they're very amenable to Chinese investments, but there's a very strong currents of anti-Chinese investment sentiments. I think that's just a matter of fact. So I think it's, I think the good thing about being a lawyer myself is, I'm not really in a position to have to find answers to these questions, but I think it's at least important to ask these questions. I'll give you one quick example to illustrate this point, and we can come back to that. Who's from Guyana here? Anybody from Guyana? From South America? All right. So I've asked this of many audiences, and typically there's silence. It's a country of 700,000 people in South America, right? So I've been there twice. I was there with a big state-owned Chinese client. They were trying to build a power plant, hydroelectric power plant that was going to take the whole country overnight from fossil fuel to clean energy. What happened was that we have been negotiating with the incumbent government that have been in power for 20, 30 years. This is, 4, 5, 6 years ago. And everything went so well, and we were in the process of negotiating the documents. We were on the verge of signing it. It was a $700 million power plant that was going to be built. And then what happened was almost overnight, the government that had been in power for 20, 30 years was voted out of power in a landslide election. And the opposition party came into power partly on a platform of opposition to the Chinese-funded project. And rumor had it that the opposition party really wanted that project too. But what they did, maybe not surprisingly, was to oppose everything that the incumbents were for. So, it was very hard for them to politically turn around once they were in power to become supportive of the project. So I think that illustrates the danger of sort of going the high road, the high routes, sort of relying on a very high-level relationship with the powers that be it Venezuela, be it Guyana, be it Ecuador. I think the same experience has turned out to be less ideal. Very traumatic, I think, oftentimes for Chinese investments in many different countries. So I think this is one of the things, people should reconsider, again, at this point of the process, whether or not that is the most productive way for the Chinese as well as for the recipients in Latin America to conduct investments. So let me stop here and we can come back and revisit.
No, thank you. Very interesting. What are the other feasible ways of accessing, entering a new country, if not through the very high-level official channels? So let's definitely go back to that. Mr. Chan, what's your take?
Thank you very much. I used to work in Shanghai for a couple of years, and I grew up in Hong Kong. I work in Hong Kong, work in Shanghai, and then I came to the States in the middle of winter. The company thinks that's valid to build this America-China corridor. So in the middle of snow, my wife and I came here. When I go to Brazil, when I go to Latin America, when I go especially with my colleagues from China, you can imagine they flew all the way 13 hours from Shanghai, 10 hours plus from Beijing to here or New York, and then we have a couple of meetings, and then we transit into Sao Paulo, Santiago. It's like for them, the trip is like 20 or 30 hours. And whenever we discuss business, I talk to my clients in Latin America, in Sao Paulo, Panama, and together with sometimes my colleagues in Beijing. Like we normally have 12 hours different from here, 11 hours different from, depending on where you are from the Latin America. This is actually the challenge when we do business here in Latin America with China. And Belt and Road Initiative probably started with, more along the Silk Road, the Middle East, Africa. That's probably originally the core. And also, from that or the ASEAN, Southeast Asia is actually much closer. Or, you need to go there for business, or there's no time zone difference, or much easier than what we are talking about here. I want to start with this, my personal experience, because when we talk about Latin-China relationship, we cannot compare with Malaysia, Indonesia. It's like a completely different geographic location and language. I have been telling my fellow panelists that I need to learn better Spanish to really, understand more, just from myself, my perspective. But given this, facts, what we are seeing, China, LATAM, one of the most important trading partners, which mentioned, and also from the financial perspective, China Central Bank, People's Bank of China have swap agreement with a number of Latin American countries. And more than that, now China onshore bond market is opening for foreign investor. Renminbi is now in the SDR. A number of Latin American central banks, they are actually investing in the offshore renminbi interbank market as well as the onshore China interbank bond market. I actually personally just discussed with one of the Latin central bank yesterday. An additional one, potentially they are exploring, want to include renminbi into their reserve portfolio.
Right.
So this, I just want to give some example of our China-LATAM relationship. Is it an easy path? Apart from the time zone difference, language very far away, apart from the political scene, I want to mention another thing is culture. In Shanghai, still true. Nowadays, a lot of the trader, even on the financial markets, they still take nap during lunch hours. For like money is time, money is everything. They do think. If you ask me, it's like very, very healthy, habit. But like I work in New York now. We eat on the desk every day. I mean, I would say different language, different countries in Brazil, Panama, Mexico. Like when Chinese company go into it, every country we have to understand the local culture. We have to understand what local people are thinking. We have to understand what local people needs in order to be successful. I think one of the things that's what Chinese company have to learn along the way. I cannot represent all the Chinese company, but that's what I'm thinking when I interact with them, in which I think a lot of them are actually learning in that direction as well.
So plenty of obstacles, but did you feel that Chinese companies, at least, or the ones that you deal with, are becoming more interested in Latin America or perhaps losing this interest?
I would say that lately there are a lot of global, macro, or geopolitics and just shifting things. Especially lately, as you know, like the last panel about the trade tension, right? The U.S.-China trade tension is the biggest one, which would ultimately have at least some impact to China. So from that point of view, I think Chinese company, they're also thinking about how they can protect the base.
Okay, so
in addition to really thinking about foreign direct investment. I think that's probably one reason why Alex mentioned has a drop from the investment from 2016 to now.
So things are going this direction for them.
But I would say, things will settle down at some point, hopefully. Yeah.
Okay. Right. You're being very diplomatic.
Things would continue to go up at some point.
Thank you. Dr. Dussel Peters, what do you think?
Yes, well, I also congratulate very much CAF and the dialogue for this dialogue on Latin America and China in Washington, which makes it particularly challenging and provocative, I think. No? When I've been in the last year several times in the US and in Washington, and I'm always amazed by the lack of knowledge, not to say the ignorance, there is on the Latin America-China relationship. No? There is no understanding of the extensiveness and the depth of this relationship. And there is still this idea, as we heard today in the morning, that the U.S. can unilaterally impose new conditions. No? This, I believe, unfortunately, is the United States and the global arena of the 1950s and 1960s, but not of 2019. No? I think that the so-called think tanks in D.C., that sometimes they neither think nor are tanks, have a lack of understanding of this relationship. And I would say even provocatively, and in order to discuss these topics, I would say for me it's amazing how we have a panel on trade in Latin America, on trade integration, etc. And yes, every half an hour we said something on China. No, this is completely out of line. Maybe we will have more time to see the depth of China in terms of trade and the impossibility today of discussing trade in auto parts, automobiles, in NAFTA, the deep disintegration of NAFTA, of Mercosur and other topics, strictly trade, not to speak of foreign direct investments, if you don't speak in detail on China, no? Again, there is a high level of ignorance. We have been trying to discuss this topic of Latin America and China from the concept of new triangular relationships, which means, yes, the Mexico-US, but also the Guatemala-El Salvador or Argentina-Brazil bilateral relationship is deeply transformed as a result of the increasing presence of China. China is changing these relationships in terms of trade, investment, culture, by the way, also in military terms. The US is witnessing we cannot do what we want in Venezuela because we have China, the Russia and other countries. No, I simply
is
would
that
like
why
to.
the US doesn't do what they want to do because there is China and Russia?
Of course, yes, because you have new global players in the region in terms of trade, in terms of Confucius institutes, but also in terms of military, specifically in Venezuela, yes. Okay. Just to finish, and in qualitative terms, and we will have time to discuss this in more in depth, but in qualitative terms, since 2013, China today is proposing a globalization process with Chinese characteristics. What does this mean? This is an alternative to the United States, to the European Union, to Japan. Again, this is in process, as they say, work in process, no? With new institutions, parallel to the institutions that we know since the Second World War and as a result of the Bretton Woods systems, under the heading of the Belt and Road Initiative with the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, etc. I'm not putting any adjective. It's very easy to say bad, good, in crisis or whatever. I'm not saying, but what I'm saying is that from a Latin American perspective, in this new triangular relationship, all countries in the region, with or without diplomatic ties with China, have to deal with this topic, either in Panama, in El Salvador, in Mexico, or in Guatemala. Guatemala does not have diplomatic ties with China, and still China is the second most important trading partner, and they are dealing with infrastructure, Confucius institutes, and lots of different topics. No? So it's not a unilateral decision from DC to say, we impose you, you are going to deal either with the US or with China. All the countries have to deal with China and with the United States, no?
Okay, so certainly the US have expressed their discontent or perhaps concern over China being more present in Latin America, and they seem to be offering also through, for example, OPIC, alternative ways or additional ways of financing, of course recognizing that, however, the financial muscle of China is unmatched, really, by anyone in the world. So how do you see this tension playing out for Latin America? Maybe we could start by addressing what we think the trade wars or trade tensions anyway between the US and China how they might impact Latin America, and then we can maybe talk more broadly about this funny three-person relationship and its implications on the region. Who would like to go first?
I think it's a fact that tensions between two superpowers will affect not only Latin America, the world. That's obvious. But to me, the question is one of, is it positive or not for Latin America to deal with China? And if the answer to that question is yes, which I think the answer to that question is yes, then the question is it positive for the United States if Latin America does better? And to me, the answer to that question is definitely yes as well. We were talking before in the previous panel about the migrant crisis and about the issues of development in Latin America and how the response that I agree with to the migrant crisis in the US and globally is to work on development on the countries of origin, to ensure that in those countries of origin there are opportunities for the people so that they don't have to risk their lives to go to other countries. In that framework, I do believe that China, as dealing with the European Union, as trade in general, represents opportunities and possibilities for growth, for development, for new businesses. And if Latin America does well, that's positive for the United States. So a simple answer, in my view, to your question, will these tensions affect Latin America? Of course, yes, but I think we need to look deeper, and I think in Washington, it's important to look deeper into that. And it's not a black and white answer. I go back to what I mentioned earlier of the importance of identifying what is the agenda. And it's something that Panama did. And you referred to earlier to the question of, is China's presence in the region increasing or decreasing? I don't think you can answer that question globally. Latin America and the Caribbean are many countries. The presence is increasing in some countries and is diminishing in others.
There is presence and also there is influence, isn't there? So,
in such an interconnected world, where is there not influence when there is presence?
yes.
I don't think that it's something that we can demonize. Every other country intends to influence countries that they deal with. And countries need to be smart,
Yeah.
not to let negative influences to your country happen. We need to be smart about it. In Panama, we defined the 12-point agenda when we established diplomatic relations 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And we strove to work towards that agenda. I think that's critical. It's central to identify what your risks are, to be smart, what sectors of your economy you shouldn't be opening up, which you could. It's a bigger question, I think.
Okay. So is China's influence presence in the region being demonized, or does perhaps the states have points when they are concerned about certain terms that may not be particularly clear when a country engages with China?
Yo diría que algunos datos específicos, por ejemplo, en el 2018, el comercio entre China, América Latina y el Caribe llegó a 300.000 millones de dólares, lo cual fue un crecimiento del 20% con respecto al 2017. Solo en Brasil el comercio fue de 100.000 millones de dólares. En el 2017, América Latina fue el mayor proveedor de frutas importadas a China. Chile, Argentina, Perú, Brasil. Es decir, ya no son los commodities, o sea, siguen siendo en parte, pero hay un cambio en cuanto a lo que es el tema del modelo económico de China, a lo cual hay que poner atención. En el 18 ocupó el segundo lugar, es decir, que de primero en el 17 al 18 el segundo. Yo viví en China, en Beijing, y vi en los supermercados chinos todos los productos alimenticios latinoamericanos. Por ejemplo, las frutas, el salmón, el vino de Chile, las carnes de Argentina y Uruguay, aguacates de México, piñas de Costa Rica, café de Colombia y Brasil, y también soya y otros productos de Argentina. China y Chile estrenaron un nuevo vuelo de cargas, que es importante porque muchos productos agrícolas, pues con las largas distancias, pues tienen inconvenientes o han tenido inconvenientes. No es en barcos que se pueden trasladar y los aviones son muy costosos. Pero hoy en día hay un vuelo desde Chile de 48 horas que para en Europa y llega a Chenzhou, en la capital de la provincia de Henan, en 48 horas. Amigos míos chilenos que, por ejemplo, tienen las cerezas que en Chile se dan fuera de la temporada, de las que se dan aquí en el norte, pues llevan sus cerezas a China y las venden muy bien. Y tenía entendido que Panamá también estaba buscando algo, eso Isabel puede darnos su referencia, de contar con un vuelo directo de carga también para hasta Henan. En cuanto al tema de inversiones, veamos, las inversiones chinas en América Latina fueron de 380,000 millones de dólares en el 2018. Y existen, esto para los amigos abogados que están aquí, y estos datos son verídicos de fuente fidedigna, 2.200 empresas chinas en toda la región latinoamericana. Solo en Brasil las inversiones chinas han sido de 60,000 millones y están realizando proyectos en agricultura, energías renovables, minería, industria de siderurgia, entre otros. Con Perú, por ejemplo, China tiene inversiones en las áreas de minería, hierro, cobre, transporte. Perú está fabricando motos. Además, con inversión china, se están construyendo represas y un nuevo puerto valorado en 1.000 millones de dólares, el cual se espera que va a estar para el 2023. Por otro lado, el tema de las tecnologías, tanto con Brasil como el mismo Perú y con Chile, se está trabajando, y tengo entendido con México. México es segundo socio comercial de China, o China es segundo socio sí, China es segundo socio comercial de México. Entonces, reflexionemos un poquito. Ante esa situación, ¿pueden nuestros países simplemente dar la espalda a la inversión china? Eso es imposible. Nosotros hemos sido socios y somos socios tradicionales de Estados Unidos y creemos que debemos conciliar. Hasta ahora todos somos miembros de la Organización Mundial del Comercio, que dijeron en el panel anterior que obviamente es necesario que haya una reforma. Pensamos que es lo correcto, es verdad, pero debemos todo apoyar y empujar en la misma dirección, porque como decía muy bien Isabel, Estados Unidos quiere también el bienestar y el desarrollo para la región. Y todos queremos el bienestar y el desarrollo de nuestros países. Y en ese sentido, yo también pude observar en China que lo que los líderes chinos quieren es el desarrollo de su propio pueblo. Cuando yo llegué en el 11 a China, fui a hablar con los líderes del Partido Comunista y me dijeron, Rosita, estamos conscientes de que no podemos seguir siendo la fábrica del mundo. En el 11 los chinos estaban conscientes de que tenían necesariamente que bajar el crecimiento, que no podían seguir creciendo a un 10 ni a un 11, porque iban a desestabilizar el mundo. Y hay una conciencia en ese sentido en China, de que, fíjense cómo fueron y me dijeron, y vamos a cambiar el modelo en el 11, me dijeron a mí, ya, que iban a cambiar el modelo y que lo que querían era que su propia población tuviera acceso a todo lo que es el consumo del bienestar. Hay 500 millones de chinos de clase media, hay 130 millones, 150 millones creo que viajaron por el mundo y que vienen aquí. Yo me veo aquí, voy a Europa, voy a París, voy a Inglaterra y lo único que veo son chinos en los museos y en todas partes. Y en Estados Unidos, aquí en Estados Unidos, yo me puse ayer a contar, paseando un poco por ahí, por los alrededores del obelisco, y eran solo chinitos los que ya iban contando 1, 2, 3, 4. Digo yo, mi madre, Dios mío, quiere decir que los chinos, y en el Times Square que estuve en Nueva York el otro día, pude hablar con una abuelita que estaba ahí con sus hijos, y eran como 5, las esposas de sus hijos y los nietos, es decir, era prácticamente medio avión que estaba ahí, unas familias chinas, y yo me puse a hablar con ella, ella me vio con los ojitos medio chinitos y me dijo, ¿usted es china? Y yo dije, mi papá, le dije en mandarín, Mi papá era chino cantonés y me dice, oh, Chongboren, Chongboren. Entonces, o sea, me decía China, China, China. Y bueno, y me dice que está muy feliz de conocer Estados Unidos. Entonces, el mundo de hoy es un mundo, como decía mi querido amigo Enrique, es un mundo de la globalización. Y todos estamos conscientes de lo que significa la globalización. Y queremos armonía y paz. Entonces, bueno, solamente esos datos, pues, para decir y animar un poco.
Well, let's keep a positive spirit in that case, looking at the future and, you know, all countries' relationships. But because my job is trying to stir things up a bit, I'm going to keep on asking you where you think the challenges are when in the relationship between, of course, Latin America and China, and how the trade tensions might impact the region. Perhaps it's a positive thing. Perhaps out of all of these tensions between the US and China, Latin America is going to benefit. What do you think?
So I will respond by making a few comments. I think we're still on trade war, right? But you know, I try to respond in a broader fashion because I'm aware of the timing constraints we have. But you know, listening to what the others have to say, you know, I'm thinking of several things. One is I think there is going to be, you know, in the foreseeable future, some competition between U.S. and China, and not just in Latin America. You know, I was in Helsinki last week. On vacation, and we went to, as you said, similar to what you described in Times Square, or I'm in New York, but I was in Helsinki. You know, my younger daughter needed to go to the bathroom, and there was no bathroom in the museum that we were visiting, so we went out. We went to a Japanese restaurant. All Japanese restaurants are now run by the Chinese, 98% of them. And we went in, and they greeted us with Chinese. And I asked them, you know, where you guys come from? And they're from the northeastern part of China. And I said, how many Chinese people are in Helsinki? And he said, maybe 30,000, maybe in Finland, but it's mostly Helsinki, right? Maybe 30 to 50,000 Chinese. Bear in mind that the entire population of Finland, the country, is something like 5.5 million people. So you're talking about 1 out of 100 people is from China. So I think the bottom line is I think the competition will be there. I think it's a matter of, you know, how do you manage it? Is it malicious or is it beneficial? You know, I want to share with you a comment from my barber, the hairdresser that I used about 15 years ago when I lived in Manhattan. I've been in New Jersey since for the schools, for the kids and everything. But when I was in Manhattan, I used to go to this barber in a basement, something on 43rd Street, 44th Street, between 8th and 9th Avenues. You know, it's really a small storefront, you know, on the basement level. I went down, there's this one guy who's been there for like 40 years. And, you know, this is 15 years ago. So 40 years prior to that. So by now it will be 55 years. So at that time, this guy had been in the U.S. for 40 years. When he was a teenager, he came from Greece to the U.S. He didn't speak any English. Even when I was visiting him, he spoke very little English. And he was very affordable. He was cheap. It was like $10, $12 for a haircut. And sometimes I chatted with him, and he was quick. But I chatted with him whenever I could. And I said, you know, how is it possible that you've been doing this for 40 years? You know, there's younger people, there's a lot of competition. And he said something that I still remember to this day. He said, simply, because his English wasn't that good, he said, I'm not afraid of competition. That's exactly what he said. And I think that's the attitude. That's the American attitude. It's my adopted country. I've been in the U.S. for 19 years. This country has given me a lot. I think the U.S. can do much better than what it is doing right now. I think, you know, the American people deserve better. But I don't know how, but I think we should, you know, there should be a better solution than, you know, what has been done to sort of respond to the China threat. I think there's a lot of negativity right now. You know, if you go tell people in Panama, tell people in Dominican Republic that, hey, you have to pick sides, either us or them. I don't think it's going to work. It's not productive. And people are not stupid. People will say one thing and then they turn around and do some other things. At the end of the day, you're stuck with the same situation, but you lose all the goodwill. And people don't trust you. People don't look up to you anymore. People look down on you because you're no longer like a trusted friend. And you're just, you're seen as more selfish than should be. So I think that's one thing. And the other thing I would mention is, so I think the competition will stay, it's just how to manage it. The other thing is, I think the Chinese state capitalism model, as I said at the beginning, I think is due for some, reconsideration. It's one thing to say, hey, this company, some of China's largest SOEs, it's one thing to say they're powerful. It's another thing to say that they are effective or efficient. That's two different things. It's like when you go to the Olympic Games, right? I think that is already happening. China could be number 1 or number 2, fierce competition with the U.S. on the medal list, but China has arguably a system where, they raise kids when they're 3 years old, the state throws money at them, and they do nothing else but practicing gymnastics or whatever for their lives. And they are then, funded, they're sent to attend the Olympics, and they win gold medals, because that's the state-led model. But arguably, from what I've read, the people in other countries, maybe including the U.S., they're self-funded, they're amateurs, right? They just do it. There's really no state support behind that. So I think that explains a lot of tension between U.S. and China. Again, I don't know how we can find the answer, but I think both China and U.S. and people of the world deserve better than sort of an argument on this level. And I think, honestly, the ball is in the Chinese court, I think, to a greater extent. But again, also, one of my favorite magazine, I think somebody from The Economist is moderating another panel tomorrow. I think I read it in the magazine the other day that says something like, over the past 40 years, since China and U.S. is having this relationship, China is not becoming more like the United States. Unfortunately, China is not becoming more like the United States, but the United States is becoming more like China in the sense that, the United States sees something in China that it doesn't like, and the United States is throwing the entire power of the state behind the policy and is going against China, and therefore it becomes sort of a clash of, if you will, two state capitalisms, which is unfortunate. I think there should be more encouragement of the Chinese private companies, because they're stuck in a rock and a hard place. Probably not the time to belabor this, but briefly, the point is this: the private companies in China, if they go to a bank that is state-owned, they want to get a loan. It's very hard for them to do that because the banks are supposed to support the SOEs. Much more so than the private companies. But now, when the private companies come to the U.S., or maybe one day to Latin America, it's already happening in Europe as well, they're characterized as agents of the Chinese state. And I think, the U.S., Europe, maybe they should also consider, sending a more positive message, both to the Chinese private companies and also to the Chinese government, that, hey, China is not monolithic. We understand that. We encourage the private sector players as long as they play by the rules, and we discourage and we go against the state-led capitalism model because it's unfair. It's not a level playground. But if you loop everything together, everything that comes out of China is either great, we want it, or all of a sudden it's all representative of the party and therefore should be resented. I think right now, unfortunately, we are sort of in a situation where everything is looped into this bucket. Therefore, there is a huge suspicion of Chinese investment, for example, in the United States, because everything is seen through the lens of the state capitalism model. And China, again, the Chinese government is not shying away from, claiming that everything, allegedly has its support.
Yes, perhaps more the representative suspicion. Which I mean, it's a fact, I think, but perhaps both sides would have to work for a more positive outcome. Mr. Chan, what do you think? Perhaps we can keep on talking about the private sector view and potential when looking at Latin America. And then we could also talk about foreign direct investments and M&As in the region.
Yeah, I'll go to the private sector. I want to start with, because I heard Rosa talk about the Times Square, and I like the Chinese over there. I'm just thinking, when I go to the Chinatown in New York, I probably find dim sum as good as or even better than Shanghai. I think like a long time ago, there are some Hong Kong people, Guangzhou people came, to the States. Some of the chefs just brought, the expertise here, which is, now Shanghai is not famous for dim sum, it's Hong Kong, so that's why. But I'm just thinking, what's the implication also, from the States and globally when there are more and more Chinese here. Private sector.
And also, sorry, their challenge is also when looking at the foreign exchange side of things and risk volatility.
I'm thinking about actually there are several specific regions China want to grow that to be more private sector driven. One of them is Shenzhen. Probably you guys heard of it. It's like the technology hub. A lot of technology company, Tencent's there. Actually, a lot of startups there, and they have their own, startup, board of listing. And it is in the greater Bay Area that they want to develop. Being so close, my home to Hong Kong, I always, admire how Shenzhen can be, in the past, the first pilot to be the economic growth, and in the future can be also the pilot of more private sector activities over there. I do hope that there will be more, reform from the public sector to the more private sector. Although lately we do not see a lot of activity going on from there. We do have a lot of very successful private company. No matter banks or tech firm, Tencent, Alibaba, Jingdong, I think those are all because of the innovation and because of the the private sector incentive in order to grow those company. I just a little of comments on trade before I go to foreign exchange. I'm just thinking if we break down a little bit. This situation obviously is very challenging for U.S.-China trade, challenging for U.S. and China. But I'm also seeing from the market's perspective, people are talking about probably it would be good for Brazil. In some sense, Brazil would export more soybean to China, and probably would take more market share. Good for Mexico, would export more to U.S. So actually some of our traders quite positive to the Mexico currency because of that, conversely. So in probably the investment from China, globally will decrease given the situation. But some individual country could still may have some benefits. So I just don't want to say everything is challenging. Of course, to us or to U.S. here is very challenging. And on the exchange rate, there's just too many things happening in August, which is supposed to be a quiet, month. Renminbi itself is passed through 7.0, has been depreciating, over 3%. Actually, if you ask me, I think it is good that they do not have to defend a certain magic number and let the currency flow more market driven. That's, I think, is a good thing. Renminbi, trying to continue go on the path of internationalization, which more floating, or now it's managed floating. In the future, probably more floating is kind of the basis for that. And lately, I have been hearing a lot of clients asking whether in the future they could also invest in renminbi, the offshore renminbi CNH, using this currency to invest, in addition to US dollar. I mean, US dollar, of course, is the global currency still, but there are a lot of discussion on that, also on trade
And trade in renminbi as well?
Sorry?
Trade in renminbi as
Yes,
well, with
yes.
the Chinese equivalent to SWIFT also
Yes.
growing. And
Yeah. So when China started the renminbi internationalization project in 2010, it's exactly 2010 July, the CNH was born. They said want renminbi to be a reserve, to be a trade currency as the first, and then to be an investment currency, and then to be the reserve currency. So kind of like SDR is the reserve currency, and then bond index inclusion, the investment currency. And trade, I think like on and off, when renminbi appreciate, depreciate, we do see activity for trade using renminbi increase and decrease. And like probably, most companies will use renminbi as trade is like the area like the Hong Kong and Singapore. Yeah. But I do hear more people asking me whether, we can trade Mexican with CNH, Brazil reais with CNH. So that's like the conversation I have.
Okay, so that's a very interesting trend. And I'm sure that volatility in Latin American currency isn't helping, thinking in particular.
Lately, I would say would be challenging, with Argentina. Yeah. Like this is the most obvious case, and like what's happening. I think also a lot of Chinese clients calling to us like how we can hedge those currencies as well. Okay. Argentina, Brazil, but I would say that's one consideration, but. I think there are other considerations.
So there are interesting opportunities, I guess, also in the FX and capital markets when looking at this relationship. I'm going to open the floor to questions soon, but first I would like to talk a bit about foreign direct investment. So FDI flows peaked in a couple of years ago, and they went down in 2018. Where are they going to, or more than halved in 2018? Where are they going to go next?
Yes.
I'm asking you about FDI because I know that you worked on a recent research on that.
Yes, answering to your question again, first I'm very astonished by the response of some of the colleagues in this panel doubting the increasing presence of China. I mean, this is why we are having this panel. Yeah. It's not on Russia, it's not on India, it's on China, because China's presence is in culture, in political, in trade, in any country. Tell me one country where this is not the case in the last 20 years. I mean, from Cuba to Venezuela to Panama to Mexico, in all countries, the presence of China qualitatively and quantitatively has increased drastically. And this is why, of course, the United States feels threatened. No? Otherwise, we wouldn't have this panel. Last year, we did a study for the ILO, the International Labour Office. China has generated in Latin America in the last 15 years 2 million jobs. No? So it's not only trade, it's not only FDI. 2 million jobs, that's more than the economically active population of full countries. So this is serious. No? In terms of trade, for example, just to have an idea, China is deeply disintegrating the integration process within Latin America, and particularly of NAFTA. The US has not even noticed this. No? They think that Mexico is stealing jobs and I don't know what. Just to have an idea, in the last from 2000 to 2019, the share of Mexico with US trade fell from 82% to 63%, by almost 20%. What is the counterpart? China. China has increased from 1% to 12%. So China, the big loser of China's increasing presence in Latin America in terms of trade, the big loser is the United States. And so when is the United States going to start discussing competitiveness in particular value-added chains, electronics, auto parts, telecommunications, instead of blaming all the world, no? from China to Russia to India to Mexico, whatever. And this is the case regarding foreign direct investment. Just to have an idea, again, we could have a seminar on this, but China in the last 10 years has been annually investing $11 billion in Latin America. 11 billions every year, no? And changing drastically. Many people in academics, in politics, still think, yes, Chinese are only searching for raw materials in South America. This is completely outdated. No? Again, I invite to whoever is interested in these topics in the auditorium to integrate to these discussions with Tsinghua University, with PETA, with Hong Kong University, and in Latin America. No? Again, because I think the think tanks in Washington are not doing a good job. No? China in the last 3 years is investing in services and in manufacturing, away from raw materials. China is changing the countries. Historically, China invested massively in Brazil, in Argentina, and in Peru. Today, the main countries are Mexico, Chile, and Peru also. And the property of the firms is also changing very substantially. Historically, up to 85% of Chinese firms were public firms. Today, this is falling to less than 20%. No? So again, we have to update, we have to integrate, and we have to be specific. We need specialists on trade, not a holistic view on China. Who thinks that China is good? And 20% says yes, 80% no. We need specialists on trade, on investment, on infrastructure, on financing. Many people still cannot distinguish between an investment and infrastructure. And we put everything in one bottle and we speak of nothing. No? So again, welcome and integrate to the existing efforts in China and in Latin America.
Okay, great. So again, you're calling for think tanks in Washington in general to become more of an expert on China. And I would have to say, though, that the Dialogue has a fantastic China program, which is headed by Margaret Myers. I'm not sure whether she's here, but they have also a fantastic database on China finances. So I think it should be mentioned. So there is someone who is actually looking and is an expert on China in Washington. Right, so yeah, there is already a question over there. If you can introduce yourself and state the company you represent as well.
Hello, how are you? My name is Gonzalo Paz from the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. I would like to take advantage of this panel to ask this question, very short question. We are very interested in international relations about continuity and change. And we have very important political change in two countries represented in this panel, in Panama and Mexico. So I would like to ask the Vice Minister Navarro and Dr. Enrique Dussel to assess the degree of continuity and change in your own countries. Of course, the case of Panama has been very recent. But I'm very sure that there will be some insights that will be very useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to take another question as well, so we can answer them together. Yes, please.
Hi, this is Yep Trin from American University, an American citizen who live a good part of her life in Asia and have known the Chinese influence. I am particularly addressing two of them here, Anton and Rosa. First, I'll let you know what I think. Then I'll pose the question. Mr. Anton, despite your illusion that the whole thing is about trade and competition and the United States could have done better, I say, I think I came to this conference and heard the first part, that it wasn't about trade. Had it not been for the United States, do you think China would be where it is today? No. The question is not trade, Mr. Anton. The question is, under the disguise and propaganda of Belt and Road Initiative, what is the true motive and intent of China for political and military strategic aim and ambition. Take South China Sea, for example. What is the need of building cemented military structure over coral reef? All right? And let's be clear-eyed. Today is not about blushing and flushing and verbiage. After I listen to all of you, I can realize that this is almost staged. This is not true. And for Rosa, are you a Dominican Republic citizen or are you Chinese?
Okay, so
You are very offensive when you said America and China is the same. We come here and trade. I believe you struck me as a mouthpiece of China and Chinese
Okay.
propaganda.
Okay, fine. So that's quite an accusation.
Let's be
you're making.
clear-eyed.
You're-
Don't you try to cover up. I'm an American citizen. I've watched everything. I spent a good part of my life in America.
Okay, thank you for your contribution, and I'm sure our guest will want to. Sorry? Did you say good luck? Okay.
That she described that you said? Was it you? Or?
It's a cover-up. Okay. Again, it's a strong accusation. I'm sure. Well, I'm sorry you feel this way. So I'm sure the guest will want to address that. Would you want to start by addressing this, and then we go to Panama and Mexico?
Sorry, you me start first and then go to.
Yes.
First of all, thank you very much for the comments and for the questions. And I think from my experience, like when I talk to clients, from China, first of all, when they want to invest abroad, probably there are some, agenda I may not know. But like at the beginning, I understand from them is they would like to diversify some of their assets from China, like a lot of, basically, Chinese normal citizens, all the savings mostly is still in China, right? I felt like a couple years back, like that's the first trend, like more the diversification of the assets. And lately, I have to say I also see a trend. More and more client is asking and telling me that they have a higher and higher standard, or they need to meet a certain return when they go out for investment. I am actually not sure. Probably that's one of the reasons leading to the drop. Maybe. I'm just trying to say,
Okay.
that's my personal experience. Like the behind, like some of the things I see. I may not be. I grew up from Hong Kong, so I may not be totally can represent. I definitely cannot represent state-owned enterprises or the China government.
No, of course.
Yeah, but that's my banking experience.
Okay. Would you like to offer a response?
Yo quería señalar que yo nací en la República Dominicana y soy orgullosamente dominicana. Amo mi país probablemente como el que más. Y debo decir que felizmente también soy descendiente de chino. Mi abuelo y mi papá llegaron a la República Dominicana en el 1920. Mi madre era dominicana y yo aprendí el idioma de mi madre, pero también aprendí mucho de la filosofía y la cultura de mi padre. Mi padre era budista, yo soy católica, pero igual tengo respeto por lo que es la filosofía y la religión del budismo. El expresidente Fernández tuvo la confianza en emitir un decreto del presidente y mandarme a China en el 2011. Anteriormente a eso, ya yo había visitado a China desde el 2005. Enrique me conoce muy bien porque él también venía a China cada año. Y yo fui con él mandato de mi presidente hacer lo que hice, a lograr que firmáramos las relaciones China-República Dominicana. ¿Por qué lo hicimos? Le voy a decir por qué. Porque República Dominicana y China tenían un acuerdo de intercambio comercial, de llamado de desarrollo comercial, desde el 1993. Y nuestras relaciones, con las limitaciones que había de no tener la relación diplomática igual que Panamá, China tiene un sistema, es su sistema y le ha funcionado a ellos. Nosotros tenemos otro sistema y respetamos y somos todo lo que decimos en el orden de lo que es la institucionalidad democrática. Tenemos dos pensamientos, y yo lo decía al principio. Nosotros en Occidente miramos las cosas con otra óptica. En Oriente se ve la vida de otra manera. Y si usted fue China, y es China nacionalizada americana, debe vivir en esa dualidad cultural. Yo soy una bicultural y no estoy, no me siento menos por eso. Al contrario, yo aprendí a respetar la cultura de mi padre y a defender la cultura de Occidente. Así es que yo creo que con eso dejo satisfecha a la señora.
Sure.
Can I respond in 30 seconds? I know it's not addressed to me, but I'll be very quick, I promise.
Sure.
Well, first of all, I don't think nothing here is personal, right? And second of all, I think I appreciate the straightforward comment. I think it's thought-provoking. And I think it highlights the point that I made earlier, that it is now increasingly hard to tell the difference between, basically the bottom line is once the money comes out of China, it's increasingly difficult to tell whether this is money from the party, from the government, from the SOEs, or this money is from the private sector. I think that's just a reality, and that there is an increasing trend of confusion. And sometimes it's intentional, maybe, where the money comes from. They want you to believe one way as opposed to the other. And China is changing, and in this respect, I would argue, it's not changing in a very positive way. And I'm not saying that state-owned is bad, private is good. Let's leave that judgment aside. But if you can't tell the difference, then people couldn't react to it. And then that lends to confusion, frustration, and suspicion, and resistance on the part of the destination countries. And I think, we're seeing that in U.S., in Europe, less so in Latin America. I think that's the topic that will need to be addressed in the next cycle.
Thank you. And now we move on to the changes in Mexico and Panama. Leslie also wanted to comment on this.
Yes, the concept of new triangular relationships is not an academic abstract concept, but it becomes very concrete for the case, I think, of Panama, of Dominican Republic. I've been in several countries of Latin America in the last weeks and months, including Mexico. The dilemma is, from the perspective of the Mexican government today, for the foreign minister, the minister of economics, etc. By far, since we have statistics, the U.S. is the most important partner in any statistics that you have, trades, FDI, whatever you want to. But China is, by the way, the second most important trading partner for Mexico since 2013, for more than 15 years. No? So the pressure from the U.S. administration, formally and informally, to say, choose either those guys or us, is an impossible question for Mexico, for the foreign minister, where China is increasingly asking and requesting, by the way, we are very interested that you sign the Memorandum of Understanding of the Belt and Road Initiative. Non-binding, but it is, from a strategic perspective, relevant for us. And you have our friends from the north that say, don't you dare to sign that, otherwise you will have big problems with us. No? I would humbly say, of course, I'm in academics, I'm not in the public sector, I would humbly say that countries from Panama to Argentina to Brazil, including Mexico, well, we have to draw a line vis-à-vis China and vis-à-vis the United States, saying, you know what, I'm going to sign, for example, the Memorandum of Understanding. Why? Because China is important for me. And by the way, NAFTA or USMCA, etc., is also relevant for me. It's not A or B, but it's China and the United States. Again, from today until November of next year, this is going to be very difficult for Mexico and for other countries. But it's the only way to do it, I think, to know both parts, you are both relevant, no?
Thank you. And lastly.
In the case of Panama, I don't see a drastic change of policy. The establishment of diplomatic relations between Panama and People's Republic of China was generally celebrated in the country. The presence of Chinese in Panama has been over 100 years. Actually, it's not too well known, but about 10% of Panamanian population is of Chinese descent that came to Panama to build a railroad before the canal was built. And actually, the current government, that party is the party that initiated commercial stronger ties with China. That party is the one that established a commercial office in People's Republic of China a long time before we established diplomatic relations. I think the steps taken ever since the establishment of relations are broad. There have been agreements, broad agreements still, because it's too short a time. I don't see a shift in policy. The United States, I am sure, as well, will remain as Panama's strongest partner in terms of commerce, in terms of vision, in terms of the values that we share. The United States is the primary user of the Panama Canal, and China is the second user of the Panama Canal. So I make a point, because it has been risen, the question of China and the U.S., I want to stress that I agree. It's not a matter of choosing. It's a matter of understanding where the complements and the sharing of vision is and where there is not, and defining there what is relevant for your own country. So I don't see a major change in policy now.
Thank you. And on that note, I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up. I'm sorry we can't take any more questions. But do feel free to approach our panelists after the conference is over. It's been a very interesting hour and a half. Sadly, we don't have longer to talk about a subject that really could take days to discuss. And please do help me in thanking our wonderful panelists.
Thank you guys, and thank you everyone for being here. Please remember to return your simultaneous interpretation headsets once you head out. Por favor, recuerden regresar los traductores simultáneos una vez salgan de la sala. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos. Thank you again for being here with us, and tomorrow's panels will start promptly at 8:30 a.m. The registration process begins